Hello, everyone, and welcome to Experiencing Point Lobos. We are very excited to have you all here with us today. My name is Anissa Santiano, and I am your Zoom host for this session. And I will be taking note of the chat box in both Zoom and Whova. Just a few reminders, this presentation will be recorded. So if you do not want to be recorded, please leave your camera off. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box and we will have time for questions at the end. Your chat box can be found at the bottom center of the Zoom screen. Now on to Jane. She will be sharing a presentation with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Anissa. It's nice to be here this afternoon with a few of you. I know it's the end of the day. So what I'm going to show you today is how we've had to change at Point Lobos State Natural Reserve since the pandemic. So just to give you a few statistics, in 2019, we had 72 docent-led walks. And I am a Point Lobos docent. I've been at Point Lobos for about 12 years, and my passion is doing school walks. That year in 2019, we had 3,183 students that came out to the reserve. And 1,660 docent hours were contributed to this. So what we do first of all is we go out into the classrooms and we present this PowerPoint. Well, not the one I'm going to be showing you because we had to pare it down since it's all now virtual. So this year we have a foundation, Point Lobos Foundation, and the foundation has always paid for any Title I schools that come out to the reserve. After we do the school presentation, they actually pay for the school bus because that's what inhibits students from it being able to go. Well, this year we can't do that. So what the Point Lobos Foundation has very generously done is after the students have their virtual presentation, our coordinator, Melissa Gobel, sends a family pass for each student that had participated. And it allows those students with their families to come into the reserve for free. And when they do come in, they get a little it says student guide, and they take what they've learned from the presentation I'm going to show you today and take their families on a tour for free. The Point Lobos Foundation will even reimburse them for gas because some of these schools that we're doing these presentations for are way in East Salinas. We usually do King City, Greenfield, Soledad. So it's all over the Monterey County. So anyway, so that's just a little bit of background. So what I'm going to do today is just present to you how I would be presenting this to my fourth grade students and their teacher. Now, I may not go through as many slides with you today because we are going to be ending at 1:45. And remember, if you have any questions, just put them in the chat box, not 1:45, 2:15. So the first thing I do is to explain what a docent is. And a docent is a knowledgeable person about kind of like a teacher, and I was a teacher for many years. And so we're knowledgeable about Point Lobos State Natural Reserve. Now you have to realize when you go out to the classrooms that these kids don't have any idea of where you're talking about. So I usually have a map with me and a map of the park, and I explain how far it is from their particular school. So Point Lobos State Natural Reserve. Now, a natural reserve is different than a state park. And this is looking down at the land and the ocean that makes up Point Lobos. Point Lobos is actually about 550 acres of land, but even more water around it is a marine reserve. And it's different than a park in that we really, really wanted to keep it natural. So activities that you can do there are very, very limited. So you can't climb trees, you can't you can't gather things, you can't eat on the trails, because we want to keep it just as special as it is. Point Lobos, named by the Spanish. When they came and found this place. Now, of course, Native Americans lived there for many thousands of years before they came, but the Spanish named it Punto de los Lobos Marinos, which means point of the sea wolves. Because what were they hearing? The sea lions barking. And we now call them sea lions, but they called them sea wolves. And then life for the Native Americans changed drastically after that, after the explorers started coming and people found out how special this place is. So I'm going to just keep going here. And of course, there's many, many things to see. These are just some examples. This picture right here is of our little whaler's cabin museum, 1851. We can't go inside of it now because of the pandemic, but hopefully it will open soon. And then we want to introduce the concept of environments. And so at this point, when I'm doing these by Zoom, I did one yesterday, I describe the environment that I'm in, because an environment is basically anything that surrounds you or anything that surrounds a plant or an animal. So for instance, my environment right now is my office. So I have a computer, I have windows, I have lamps, I have pictures. It's kind of a boring environment. And then I call on several of the students in the classroom, or the teacher does after they raise their hand, and they describe their environment. They may be in their bedroom, they may be in the kitchen. And then, so we talk about what an environment is. And then I'll go right into the 3 environments that we're going to talk about. There's probably 5 different kinds of environments or zones at Point Lobos. We talk about these 3: the coastal scrub zone, zones and environments are the same thing, the marine environment, and the forest environment. So in terms of the coastal scrub zone, I want the students to notice, like if the plants are all the same height or all different heights. And we talk about the fact that the coastal scrub zone doesn't have any trees in it. So these plants and bushes really need to adapt to a very, very hot environment, hot and windy. We also talk about the concept of photosynthesis, and that photosynthesis enables plants to survive and to grow and to make their own food. And I think that is the most important aspect that they need to take away, is that we really need to thank the plants. Because if they couldn't make their own food for the smaller animals to eat, then the larger animals eat them, and then we eat both plants and animals. No other life would live on Earth. So we always thank the plants. And then we go through and talk about some of the common plants or bushes in the coastal scrub. We have long chats about poison oak, leaves of 3, let it be. The picture on the left is green in the springtime. The picture on the right is more in the fall, and then the leaves fall off. So I do talk to them about, I wouldn't pick up any little sticks because you can get poison oak from everything, correct? The Native Americans used to dye their baskets with the dried berries, dried seeds of the poison oak. They may have, gotten some immunity to it. Going on, we talk about other plants. We talk about the sticky California sagebrush, also used by the Native Americans to aid in ailments. They make tea out of it. Talk about the sticky monkey flower. The Native Americans used to crush up these leaves which are sticky, and put them on their sores or their rope burns, and it would act like a bandage. Now, when I was doing these in person, of course, when I led the school walks, then I would actually pick a leaf off and have them, be able to touch it. It's really hard for all of us docents that were very involved in the field trip program not to have those this year, because when they would come out, they've already had all of this from one of us going out to their school. Then they come and we get to show them all of this, and it's really hard not to be able to do that this year. I know there's a lot of docents that are missing it. We get to see how much they remember. But I think it's wonderful that the Docent Corps has even, just tried to do the best they could during this pandemic. So we're still trying to present to them, still giving them the opportunity to come out with their families. And those passes are actually good until the end of the summer, which is nice. So just a few other flowers plants that we see. We've got the wood mint. We talk about the square stem versus the round stem of most plants. We have animals. They always will see these little white crowned sparrows in the coastal scrub, because this is the environment that provides them with both food and shelter. And those are the two basic needs, right? Food and shelter that we all need. So these little birds can find insects and seeds in the thick brush, but the thick brush also provides something else. If there's a predator out there, they can run underneath the brush and get away from them. So we talk about survival skills, talk about the brush rabbit and how sometimes you'll see a lot of brush rabbits out there, and you might have more or less due to changes in your environment. For instance, if there's been a lot of rain and food is plentiful, then you might have more brush rabbits. Or if there's less predators like the coyotes and the bobcats hanging around, then you might have more brush rabbits. But if the food supply decreases or the predators increase, of course, you're going to likely be less brush rabbits. The gray squirrel, ground squirrel, is one that we always see out there, so we talk a little bit about it. We do have another squirrel called the gray squirrel that actually climbs up in the trees, gnaws off a branch, and eats the Monterey pines. But these little ground squirrels, we see them scampering around. We talk about never feeding wild animals, even in their own backyard, and especially ground squirrels, because they could carry fleas that might be plague infested. Then we talk about some of the plants and animals that are found in more than one environment. They always like this little guy, the dusky-footed wood rat. And they make these great big nests in Point Lobos, and then we call them condominiums because there's different rooms for different activities. So there might be a room where the rat stores their food. They're kind of like pack rats. There might be another room where it stores other treasures. It might be a room where they have their babies, where they sleep. And we talk about the term nocturnal. And usually I have at least one student from each classroom who can tell me the definition of nocturnal. I asked my four-year-old grandson the other day what nocturnal was, and he was able to tell me. So that was kind of neat. And during the wintertime, you can really see these great big nests when there's not a lot of poison oak that has blossomed out. Mule deer is another one that lives in more than one environment. You might see them in the meadows. You might see them in the coastal scrub. You might see them in the forest. And the great blue heron. This heron at the bottom picture right here, this heron is sitting on a nest. And it looks like there might be another one right here, whether that's a chick. I think that's probably a mated pair. And they nest every year at Point Lobos at the tops of the trees. So they are nesting in the forest. But of course, they eat fish. So they're fishing in the marine environment, and they fly over and maybe gather things for their nest in the coastal scrub environment. Great blue heron, one of my favorites. Then we go on to the next environment. We talk a lot about what the word marine is. Usually somebody comes up with, oh, it's the ocean. And then we talk about marine being anything. You're in a marine environment if you're living on a lake or a river. But our marine environment has both the rocky coastline and tide pools. And so these are all photos that have obviously been taken at Point Lobos. And some we talk about, or we ask, what do you think some of the characteristics of the marine environment are? And they'll usually say, oh, well, it looks like there's waves and maybe salt water and seaweed and lots of sea life. And then we talk about what the shoreline means. A shoreline is where the ocean in this instance meets the land. Let's see. We talk about how important the Kelp Forest is. Most of these students that we serve, these are fourth graders. Most of them have already been to the aquarium at some time in their life. But we talk about what we see is this what we call the canopy floating on the surface of the earth or ocean. And what the fish see, and scuba divers, is this forest. It's like a forest on land, but it's under the water. And how the kelp forest is so important, not only as a habitat or environment for many animals, fishes, as well as invertebrates, but also because it can give off CO2. And this kelp could grow to be more than a foot a day. We talk about what the term invertebrates are. I usually have the students put their hand on their back and feel their backbone. So we are not invertebrates, we are vertebrates. But we talk about how fun it is to go tide pooling at Point Lobos, and sometimes you'll see some of these invertebrates, like the beautiful moon jellies, which you'll see out floating in the water. The purple sea urchin, also an invertebrate. They don't have backbones. The purple shore crab, and of course our ochre sea stars that are looking like they're having lunch on our California mussels. Now the sea stars are really a lot less than they were before we had the sea star wasting disease that started in 2013. So we do not have very many ochre stars out there anymore. They're slowly coming back, but not that rapidly. And then of course we talk about the marine mammals. Mammals in the marine environment. And we first of all talk about the 5 characteristics of a mammal. And I've only had one class this year. I've done about 7 presentations where they could come up with all of the 5 characteristics of a mammal. Then I came home and said to my husband, can you tell me what the 5 characteristics of a mammal are? And he couldn't come up with it very quickly either. But of course it is give live birth, most, breathe air, warm-blooded, give milk, and have hair, some kind of hair. So we talk about how these the mammals in the marine environment have really had to adapt, because like the gray whale lives in the water, but it has to breathe air. So we talk about that when you go out to Point Lobos, look for these blows. It's when that gray whale has to come to the surface of the water to breathe, and it's pushing the old air out, and that's what you see when you see that after you see that puff, what we call sea puffs, and they have to take a new one in. We talk about the migration of the gray whale being one of the longest migrations in the world, coming up from their feeding grounds near the Arctic in Alaska, where they feed all summer, late spring to early fall. And then they have to go 6,000 miles down to Baja California, where they give birth in the warmer lagoons and where they mate before they come back up again. So right now, the humpback whales are going back up. I mean, the gray whales are going back up north. And so we have seen lots of blows out there. We talk about the size being about the same size as their school bus, if they can remember what a school bus looks like, and weighing more than 45 tons. When we talk about how they don't have teeth, these great big whales that weigh 35 to 45 tons don't have any teeth. How do they eat? And we talk about the baleen being that brush of the upper jaw. We also talk about the humpback whale. These are the whales I love to watch during the summertime when they're feeding out there on our plethora of food. Could be krill, anchovies, sardines. And then we talk about the mammals that they are pretty much guaranteed to see out there. And that's the sea lion and the harbor seals. And we talk about, what's the difference that you might notice here? See any differences? And then we go through some of them. Like ears. Harbor seals, this one has internal ears. See the slit right here? The ear's inside. Whereas sea lions have external ears. We talk about color. Harbor seals can be white, they can be spotted, they can be gray, but these guys all brown all the time. So spotted. You also see a difference in their flippers. Sea lions have much taller flippers, longer flippers. They can stand up very straight. And these guys kind of shuffle along like a worm. And then we also talk about their similarities. They're both marine mammals. They both hunt at night, so they're nocturnal. They both have blubber, and we talk about who knows what blubber is, to keep warm. And they both eat fish. And then, of course, the other one we hope that they will see, not always, is our beautiful southern sea otter. These are harder to find. You're going to look in the kelp. They're going to be on their backs, and they're going to be with their head out of the water and their feet out of the water. And the reason for that is their head or their nose and the pads on their feet don't have any fur. And you know that they have the densest fur of any animal on the earth, 1 billion hairs per square inch. And when we're out at Point Lobos, we could actually have them touch a pelt of a sea otter. And then we talk about how these little guys were almost hunted to extinction. And that was the reason for that was because of that soft fur. We also talk about the fact that they use tools. They're one of the few animals besides humans that actually will use a tool. They will use a rock to break the seal of an abalone, which is one of their favorite foods. They'll also use a rock and have it on their stomach, and then they'll pound the crab on it in order to remove the shell. And we talk about what good mothers they are. We talk about harbor seals and sea lions. Harbor seals stay with their mom for about 4 weeks. Sea lions a little longer. And they have to learn everything. But these sea otters stay with them for almost a year to teach them everything they need to know. See how they're on their backs. So when people tell me that they've just seen about 14 sea otters and they're all looking like this with their head out of the water, I know They're not seeing sea otters, they'll see what we call kelp otters, which is bull kelp. They think the roundness is the head of an otter. So then we talk about some of the birds in the marine environment. I love the story of the pelicans. The pelicans were another species that almost became extinct in the 60s and 70s because farmers were using a pesticide called DDT, and that the DDT would get into the fish. They would eat the fish, and then for the birds, when they laid their eggs, the eggs shell was too fragile, so they weren't being able to reproduce. I also talk about how the pelicans dive down for their food. They are fisher birds for sure, and they can dive down 6 or 7 feet under the water. They have cartilage in their neck that allows them not to break their necks. But I've heard that some old pelicans actually go blind from all this diving. But we had a ton of them at Point Lobos this summer. It was just amazing. They would be all up around in the trees, hundreds of them, hundreds. It was just, we don't know why they don't nest at Point Lobos. But we do have these guys that are nesting right now. So if you get out to Point Lobos this spring, go out to Bird Island. These Brandt's cormorants get these bright blue, like a robinette blue under their chin during mating and nesting time. And right now they're building hundreds and hundreds of nests. And they're doing little courtship dances. It's really quite cute. They nest on the top of the rocks. The pelagic cormorants actually build their nests right in the cliffs. So they're always fun to find too. We talk about the concept of camouflage and the fact that these Western gulls, the chicks, which one is harder to see? Why do you think that? They're more susceptible to predators, etc. Talk about the great egret being another good fisher bird. It has hollow legs, so it can actually sit on the kelp or stand on the kelp and just wait for little fishes to come by, and then it brings its beak down and spears it, just like a spear fisher person would do. And then we talk about the last environment. And what are the characteristics of a forest? So what do they see? Obviously trees and grass and plants, some animals, some algae, some fungi. So this is a forest outside, a land forest. And we talk about the 2 different kinds of forests that we have at Point Lobos. We have the Monterey cypress forest, incredibly picturesque trees. These trees can live to be about 400 or 500 years old, but they also don't, when they die, the tree just doesn't fall down like most trees. So we have these things that they call in Pebble Beach, the ghost trees. They can stay standing for a long, long time. They have very leathery leaves. Their cones are really small, about the size of a walnut. But the really cool thing is these trees are only indigenous to Point Lobos and Pebble Beach. They've been planted all over the world, but they're only indigenous to those 2 spots. The other forest we have is the Monterey pine forest, and they can grow to about 100 feet tall. They're about 100 years old. We have a lot of them that have been falling down lately. They're probably over 100 years old. So there's a lot of fuel on the bottom of the forest right now, but their cones are bigger. These are the ones the gray squirrels love to chew off the branch and eat the cones about when they're in their 2nd or 3rd year. We also have California oak trees, coast live oaks, and those are really the only 3 trees we have in the entire reserve. We have one pittosporum. We don't know how it got there. And then we go through some of the beautiful wildflowers that are starting to pop out. So I encourage you to come to Point Lobos, the Douglas iris, the seaside daisy, tons and tons of wildflowers that are just starting. We go through fungus and alga that they might see in Point Lobos. Talk about mushrooms being fungi, and that we don't pick mushrooms or anything at Point Lobos, but it's not wise. Never pick mushrooms in the wild. Get them from your grocery store, because many, many kinds of mushrooms are poisonous. We talk about lace lichen being an alga and two types of fungi. The alga provides the food because it can photosynthesize. The fungi provide the structure. And a lot of visitors, when they come out, think it's hurting the tree. They think it's Spanish moss, and it's not hurting the tree. Lace lichen is an indicator of healthy air, and it is really useful for the tree because it absorbs moisture, and then the moisture drips down and it acts as a, irrigation system kind of thing. It also provides water for the deer that live in the reserve. We don't have a lot of deer in the reserve, and just like because there's no water that runs all the time in the reserve. So even the Native Americans would come out to gather food because there was a plethora of food and things to get from the ocean, but they could not live at Point Lobos all the time because the two creeks that are the boundaries of Point Lobos, San Jose Creek to the north, Gibson Creek to the south, the water does not flow all year round. So most of the Native Americans, all the Native Americans that came to Point Lobos for those thousands of years would go back up into the valleys, like Carmel Valley, where there was water all year. I also talk about the Native Americans used to use lace lichen to line a particular kind of basket. It was the one that they carried their babies in. So if the babies went to the bathroom, this would absorb it. They can dump it out and put some fresh. So I say lace lichen is our first disposable diaper. Another thing that we always get questions about is Trentopolia, because if you're on the Cypress Grove Trail, you're going to see this beautiful, beautiful green, it's a orange stuff all over the trees and all over the rocks. And they come back to the information station and they say, what's killing the trees? What's that orange stuff? And we explain to them it's actually a green alga, but it's masked with carotene in it, just like what makes carrots orange as well. And when I'm on school walks, we turn this one corner and then you can see all of this orange. And I say, okay, now we're entering the land of orange. One of the things I do with students too is I give each of them, usually we have about 6 students in a group when they do get to come out, and I give them kind of a long word that's their word for the whole hour and a half. And everyone will say, okay, now who has the one that's the orange stuff? And whoever had Trentopolia would say Trentopolia. Might be things like fascicle, which is the bundle of pine needles that we show them, or photosynthesis, the process of plants making food. But they really get it. And then we talk about the 2 rock formations. The igneous rock under Point Lobos is a rock called granodiorite. It was formed 100 million years ago when dinosaurs still roamed the earth. It's an igneous rock, which means that it was formed when the molten earth, the magma, was cooled and then became solid. And most igneous rock cools within the earth, but occasionally some spews out. That's when we have lava from a volcano. And then we have our sedimentary rock, which are layers of mudstone and sandstone and limestone, which is the animals. And they've settled into the bottoms of lakes and oceans and valleys and formed these layers. And we have these funky features in this Carmelo formation, which is our sedimentary rock. And this is where harder rocks has kind of gotten in a circle and made an imprint. It's really cool. And this would have been all underneath these rivers and submarine canyons. I like to end by really talking a lot about our early residents of Point Lobos, although I've talked about it during the whole presentation. These are just pictures that may depict what it looked like when they were there going fishing or mending nets. But the cool thing is when you go out to Point Lobos, you're going to see these great big patches of very dark soil with a whole bunch of shell fragments in it. And these are called middens from the Ohlone, the local group that frequented Point Lobos. And the dark soil, of course, is from the ashes from their fires. And the shells are from all the things that they ate. There are lots of abalone shells, lots of mussel shells. And when you find one of these dark patches, you look out towards the water and you realize these Native Americans knew where to camp. They always picked the most beautiful, beautiful views in the reserve. I always end by going back over that concept of food web. Plants make their own food. Small animals eat the plants. Larger animals eat the smaller animals. And that how we need to continue to always thank our plants. And then I've already sent this information to the teacher before I present it, but this is an app that you can download for free from your app store. It's called Discover Point Lobos, and it has tons and tons of different activities geared towards maybe the 9 to 14-year-old level, but also great for adults as well. So that is a downloadable app. And then we talk about the whole logistics of them getting their passes. They'll be sent out to the schools. Their teachers will tell them when they can come pick them up, and how we really, really want them to bring their family out for free. What a nice gift it is from our Point Lobos Foundation. Also, go over what to wear, because sometimes people don't wear enough clothes and they get cold. And I also talk about there's no dogs in the reserve. So if they come with their family and their family dog, they're not going to be able to come. We're so looking forward to hoping that in September we can invite schools back again. But in the time being, with the presentations that I've been doing this year, I've found that the teachers and the kids are really appreciative of it. We also talk about ways that we can keep Point Lobos natural and how they can keep their own environment natural by staying on trails, by eating only in designated picnic areas, by leaving the natural beauty as it is. And that is the end of my presentation. And does anyone have any questions about Point Lobos? I would say if you're going to go out and visit, you want to go early in the morning. We're open until 8 o'clock till 7 during daylight savings time. You do not, so I would come before 10 o'clock or after 3:30. Very nice times to explore. I also kind of show my green jacket, which shows that I am a state park volunteer at Point Lobos, and I always encourage them to look for us. You know, if you find a docent, they'll probably take your family around at a socially distant, with masks. Masks are required at Point Lobos when you pass people on the trails, and you can't do that 6 feet of sheltering or whatever you call it. Yeah. So any questions at all? Well, thank you all.
If there's any questions, please feel free to speak up or write your question in the chat box.
Okay. Well, thank you and enjoy the rest of the conference. I've been putzing around and looking at different ones. It's really fun. Looking forward to it. Thank you, Nissa.
You're welcome. Thank you, Jane, for an awesome presentation. Thank you, everyone, for coming and being here. We appreciate your feedback. If you could go ahead, there is a post-session survey with only 2 questions. Please rate the session by clicking on the button Rate Session and hover below this video, or you can go ahead and post your thoughts on the community board underneath general feedback. Please enjoy more sessions tomorrow and pre-recorded videos. And also don't forget to go outside, enjoy your local parks and open spaces.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Just a couple of things too. There's a beautiful Point Lobos video that one of our docents also did that's on the video section, and another video of a docent that is reading that Eric Carle book, which is really neat while on the beach. Okay, thank you.